welcome to another episode of Coffee Talk. I'm really excited to have our special guest here, Nicole Browning from CorpCare. She is a licensed professional counselor, and she is the Director of Client Management at CorpCare. And today we're going to have just a really honest conversation about EAPs, Employee Assisting Programs, what they are, how they can help your practice, and kind of share some stories. So, Nicole, I'm really excited to have you here today on Coffee Talk.
I'm so excited to be here. This is fun.
So first and foremost, as you may know, Coffee Talk is all about the coffee mugs. So today I have a very special mug. It's actually I Can. And the reason why I like this mug is because I feel like sometimes, especially on Mondays, I don't want to do things, right? I don't feel like I have the energy or the bandwidth to take on more. And sometimes I realize if I just change my mindset a little bit, actually, I can do that. Really helps my attitude, especially on Mondays. So that's my coffee cup. What do you have today?
Not as impressive or insightful, but I am not a coffee drinker. So coffee mugs are hard to come by in our house. But my mom bought me this last Christmas, so I had to bring it, right? It's the dogs.
I love it.
And then it says dog person inside. Sorry, those of you who are cat people, I'm not a cat person. I'm a dog person. So this is my go-to if I have to have a mug.
I love it. Well, thank you for sharing. I did have a cat mug not too long ago, so I feel like your dog mug does justice in this episode. Well, let's jump into it. So I feel like our members have heard me and my team and Angel. We talk about it in our peer share program. We talk about the stress of this profession. We talk about the heaviness that sometimes we feel. And we talk about the tools and resources that our members, that veterinary practices in general in this industry can use and may not know a whole lot about. So I really want to talk about EAPs, and with you and what you do, you're the expert in this area. Really wanted to bring you on so we could have this conversation. So Nicole, what are EAPs? How can they benefit a veterinary practice?
I think, 2022, right? It's been one heck of a couple of years. So I don't think we need to even let anyone know like why mental health is important these days, because not only is it hard life in general, but y'all and what you do on the day-to-day basis, like I can only have this much of an insight and empathy into the stress I've been hearing about and the burnout and the things that go on in that day-to-day work life. So the reason that EAPs exist way back when they were created, it's an employee assistance program. Originally, they were mostly for like alcohol and drug use to help target folks who were struggling with alcohol on the job because it was accepted back then. And then they realized what really was happening is people's home lives also affect their work life. Yeah. And so, if you're having marital issues or kid issues or whatever, or you have anxiety or depression, sometimes that bleeds into work. And so what they figured out is, if we could get people into a better, healthier place, then they can be more productive employees. And we don't have to worry as much about the absenteeism or presenteeism and those sorts of things. So yeah, employee assistance program, their main purpose is they offer counseling, right? Some sort of a prepaid counseling benefit so that the employee isn't having to pay out of pocket to go to a therapist, to go to counseling, to address their anxiety, depression, marital issues, to send their child, their 13-year-old kid to counseling for whatever, they may be struggling with. It also has some other components to it. So they realize it's not just mental health, but like if I'm worried about the summer coming up and I don't know what I'm gonna do with my kid every day, right? Like some of those ancillary services that they offer are work-life benefits where they can help you find like daycares or summer camps, or they have childcare and elder care referrals. There's even a legal component. So if you're going through a divorce, you can talk to an attorney for free, right? Wow. So that's why it's mutually beneficial. It really helps your employees deal with their day-to-day stuff, but it helps the practice because then your employee can, feel more taken care of and whole, but it also shows how much you care, that you care about them as a whole person, not just in their kind of 9-to-5 role.
I mean, it's so important. You said a couple things that kind of triggered something for me, and that was, I think sometimes as the boss, right, as a leader in your practice, in your organization, it looks good on paper to say, okay, these are my employees and they work these hours, right? And to really focus on the hours that your employees are working for you, that they are your employee. But they're spending so much time not in the job, but what they're facing and what they're having to deal with outside of their 9 to 5 hours, or their shift impacts what they do on that shift, right? There can't be this distinct home life, work life where you turn the clock off and you're like, suddenly I'm feeling better because I'm at home, and you turn the clock back on and I'm just an employee, that's my role. It doesn't happen that way, right? We are just who we are, and everything that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis impacts and influences every other thing that we're doing. So it sounds like these programs are really designed to kind of be that filler, right? To kind of fill that space between what's happening at home and being a good employee, and how we can make our employees just happier and healthier as a whole. And that's important.
It really is. And, from the conversations I've had with practice owners and hospital and clinics, is they do care about their employees, and they don't really know how to help. And so this is just kind of like one of those small little pieces of the puzzle that they can add in to create this fuller package, so to speak. But to be like, I do care about you and I want you to be okay. And it's not just your role, but like, I want you to be a happy person,
Yeah. I mean, with everything that listen, we've all heard it, right? The statistics are in on suicide in the veterinary profession, on mental health in the veterinary profession, on burnout, compassion fatigue. We've all read the headlines. We've seen them in journal articles. We've listened to podcasts about them. Yet so many practices, I feel like, don't know what they can do. So they acknowledge that this is happening within our profession, but feel kind of lost on what they can do for their employees. Because listen, I'm not a therapist. I was a practice manager. We work with practice managers. We work with practice owners who, went to vet school. They went to management school. They're licensed technicians, but counselor isn't in their repertoire.
Right.
But we're sometimes put in these positions where, oh, I got to put my counselor hat on today. And that's really not something that comes easy. I mean, can you speak to that a little bit, Nicole? I mean, what does that do to the leader who's trying to facilitate or trying to, be the counselor, if you will, in some of these situations?
It's so much stress, right? Like, and this sense of responsibility and the ownership that you're trying to take on, but it's just outside your purview, right? It's just not your wheelhouse, but it is mine, right? Like, and so that's a lot of the phone calls that I get. Like, kind of one of the bonus features is like, people will just call me like, look, I have this situation, I don't know what to do, right? Like, I have an employee who I think is having suicidal thoughts. What should I do in this situation? Right? Because you're the one they're going to come to. People, I encourage it, but people don't want to call a 1-800 number. They don't want to call the crisis line. They don't want to talk to a stranger, right? Oftentimes you're their first line of defense because they know you, they feel comfortable with you.
Yeah. And sometimes the first line of defense before family.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Because there's that safety net there, or there's this sense of you're going to know what to do, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're in this kind of role of leadership and you must know everything. So I'm going to come to you, which I think really says a lot. It speaks to, if you know that there's personal problems happening, that says a lot. That means they're comfortable, they're willing to share those things with you, which I think should not be taken lightly. But I think it's just helpful to have somebody that you can go to who that is their wheelhouse, or to have like, we have this benefit. If you're willing to talk to somebody, you can go to a professional for free and it's not going to cost you anything. You can just call and talk to them and see how that feels to get the ball rolling. And so that's where I think it can kind of take some of that pressure off of the owner to be able to shuffle it to somebody who can handle that kind of pressure.
And that's important, because I think that pressure is what also, contributes to the stress and to the overall fatigue or mental health of the leaders of our practices, right? Because they're taking on this weight from their employees and they don't really know what to do with it. We're all healers in this profession. We all want to heal. That is a driving factor of what we do. And sometimes we're in these situations where, we might not know how to handle it. And having an employee assistance program that your practice is signed up for makes it really easy to get the professionals in the right places to help your team, to help you, whatever it might be. There's a stigma, I think. I think we are slowly moving past it as we hear more about mental health, as we talk openly about it. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that it was kind of hush hush, you don't talk about these things. How has, you know, kind of the way we've come as a society where we're a little bit more open about mental health, how has that changed people's perceptions of EAP programs?
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that it has gotten better, because we still have so far to go, right? And I struggle because I always kind of say, like, you know, you can ask somebody who their hairdresser is. I love your hair. Who's your hairdresser? You can't ask somebody who's their therapist, right? You can, but we're not to that point yet, right? Because of that stigma that you're talking about. It's not quite there where people are willing to talk about their issues in the open. But I think what your point is like, I even see on social media right now, right? Like there's new hashtags that are like self-care, mental health awareness, recover out loud instead of in a closet in the, you know, enclosed, and not talking about the anonymous part of being in recovery, right? So there are some of those shifts. And I think, man, yes, we have a long way to go, but what it is starting to do is those doors that we were just talking about a minute ago, where at least employees are willing to say, look, I'm struggling. I need a mental health day. I need to address my mental health. They're starting to have those conversations, which didn't happen 5 or 10 years ago. So I think EAPs honestly are really underutilized, even for companies who have them, they're not as utilized as they should, because people are still scared to take that next step, because they don't know what it's like. They don't know what talking to a therapist is. They know what they've seen on TV, or they're not quite ready to address their demons, so to speak. I think people think that going to counseling has to be to deal with a crisis, not just burnout or emotions or stress or family stuff, right? They think it has to be this crisis situation. So I think that's kind of the next barrier is breaking through that, but it certainly has come a long ways.
That's such an interesting point that you bring up, and that's that crisis level, right? So I feel like we're programmed as human beings to catch on or to identify people that might be in a crisis mode a little bit easier than maybe those individuals that are quietly suffering or quietly struggling. So I know this is a little bit off topic here, but is there anything that, you know, as an employer, as a leader of a practice, you know, you can offer an EAP in a way that's not, you know, oh, I feel like you need this, you're struggling, but more of an acknowledgement to those that might be on the quiet side, that aren't outwardly exposing that they're struggling, but we want to make sure that they understand that there is something that they can do in their, you know, kind of personal space, if you will. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think it's kind of in that, you know, we're talking about that marketing message, and even internally as a company, we've been talking about changing our messaging a little bit to be like, you know, are you feeling down? Are you feeling stressed out? Are you burnt out? Are you having trouble managing finances? Are you having trouble managing your emotions? Right? So that it's not just crisis mode. So I think that's part of it. We're actually, I think, going to change some of our marketing materials to be a little bit softer in that sense, so that you can open the door easier. As far as having that conversation, I think even just it doesn't matter how you open the door. If you open the door to create that sense of safety, if they haven't come to you, if it's not that outward employee, but it's the person that you're a little concerned about, like something is just off. She's not quite herself these days, right? Like ask, is everything okay?
Right.
Are you doing okay? Just so you know, there is this program, right? If you have an EAP to be able to offer, like you can call them. It's totally confidential. They will never tell me you called. Like, I think that's the other key point with the stigma piece is I don't want my employer to know that I'm struggling. And with us, we have HIPAA laws we have to follow as well, right? So we can't tell anybody that you called. We can say that you had 2% of your hospital. I forgot to turn my phone off, so sorry about that. We can say that we had 2% of your hospital call to access services, but you're not going to know that Sarah Jane called in, right? And so I think that's even part of the messaging is just to say, you know, we have this service. If you're struggling at all, if you just need somebody to talk to, if you want to check out their services, here's a flyer, here's some information on them. No pressure, but it's there if you want it. And most EAPs, like we have an online kind of portal where people can get some self-help first. So even if they're not quite ready to make that phone call, they can jump on and do like a self-assessment tool, like to assess their depression, or am I bipolar, or even use finance tools, stuff like that, so that they can kind of do some webinars or some trainings just to kind of get their feet wet to see if maybe this is something they want to address further. I think a lot of times that's an easier, softer entrance as well.
Yeah. Well, and it makes sense because, there's usually there's usually a path that employees that are struggling take, right? It's not like your smiling employee one day goes and, 2 weeks later, without any other warning signs, are, just absolutely in crisis mode. There's usually these signs that that can be subtle, but that practice leadership or even your coworkers can pick up on, especially if they are close with that employee, right? They're these little things. So it's, for example, maybe it's an employee that, is usually on the floor with patients and getting the snuggles and getting the kisses from the dogs that come in the back, and then suddenly is a little bit more removed from that, or gets easily frustrated with a patient, and that's not really in that person's, MO. They don't usually act like that. So it's these little signs that when you start picking up on, that's when you can say, hey, it looks like you might be, having a bad day, just so you know, like there is a resource if you need it, right? So it's not necessarily assuming, but it's basically feeling a little bit more comfortable in your practice to say, hey, if you are feeling this way, there is a resource for you to take advantage. There's a tool. It's not saying, oh, you're in crisis mode, but hey, something's a little off, right? I think so. It's so easy for us to be like, oh, well, this is, in case I have a suicidal employee, but there's so many other things that can be going on, just like we've mentioned before. So many things.
Yeah. And I think that, especially what you mentioned, just those slight deviations, right? Like, and it might not even be their stuff. It might just be they're stressed out because of whatever's happening at home, and it's bringing itself in. So they would never think to say something to their employer about they're struggling with their spouse, right? Because that's personal. I'm trying to keep that at home and not bring that into work. But if they're extra tearful or defensive, right, all those things that you're mentioning, I think that's a key point. I think that's a great point that you bring up, because that's why it's so important to have something that will help not only the employee, but, by the way, their dependents, right? So these kind of services also work for the family. So that 13-year-old kid can go to counseling, the spouse can go to counseling, like they have access to. And sometimes that can be a relief, right? Like if I'm stressed out because of their stress and they're getting help, like, oh, I can feel a little bit better and have some relief that way. So I think any way we can get some of that soft messaging out, it, like you said, doesn't have to be once they're to their breaking point.
Yeah, and it really shouldn't be. I mean, it should be in place way before we have employees that are in crisis. I mean, just so you guys know, we use CorpCare as our EAP for Vertical Vet. It was something that I've been really passionate about for a long time. My father committed suicide not that long ago. So it's one of those things that I'm very well aware of within my personal family. And I've seen and have had veterinary professionals that are in my community that have really struggled, and I've seen it. And so it was important for Vertical Vet to be able to offer a tool like an EAP program through CorpCare to our employees, knowing that, one, we wanted to make sure that they did have a tool in case anybody have any struggles. And what we've realized is that our employees are using CorpCare, are using the EAP, and it's for things that are happening with their families or wellness. That's another really big thing. Is I would love to come to this, call today with you, Nicole, and be like, I am a shining example of a perfect person and I have no problems and my life is peachy. But there are things that I can't control in my life. And it's been really nice for me personally to have somebody that I can reach out to, and to have some tools available from just a wellness side of things. How can I be a better person? Because I know I want to be.
You know what I love about that term that you just used, Megan, the wellness piece, is like, we keep talking about how people think about counseling in crisis. I really would love to see in the future people think about counseling. And we're seeing this, I hate to label it, but more with millennials, and it's a newer view on things, but it's more about like emotional maintenance. Like I don't have to be in crisis. I just go to therapy to go to therapy, right? Like if you go have your teeth checked every 6 months, you don't wait till you're in crisis. You just want to prevent and just make sure you're doing all the things right? Like I take my dogs every year to the vet, not when they're in a crisis, but just to check up and make sure that things are okay. I don't want to wait for it to get to that point. Like, right, it should be part of that wellness package that we're doing for ourselves every year to prevent, to maintain, like make sure that you got over that crisis, but that you keep up on your skills. I don't know how many times I've done counseling with people who have been in therapy before. They know the skills, they just stopped using them when the crisis was over. And so I'm like, what did you do before in this situation? Well, I did this, this, and this. Did it work? Uh-huh. Okay, I'm done, right? Like, I just have to remind you of what you forgot to do before.
I mean, it's so true. I mean, and that's one of the interesting things about vet med is that we are so used to talking about wellness. We have wellness exams. We schedule our patients for wellness checkups so that we can update their vaccines and get our hands on that patient to make sure that they are living their healthiest life possible. So this is kind of the mental version of a wellness exam.
Yes.
And that's how we really need to think about EAPs. I want to switch just a little bit here, and that is kind of bringing this in as a service. So I'm sure that you've heard, and this is some of the stress that's been on the shoulders of veterinary leadership, and that is that there is, you know, a lack of professionals out there. We are short-staffed across the board. We feel like we've been this way for quite a while, and the pandemic, I think, has put a little bit bigger highlighter or put a microscope really on this problem that we've been seeing over the course of the last few years. And so we have employees that are leaving the field for good. They're moving into either human health or completely out of the healthcare field. And we also are seeing that there are a lot of corporate practices that are out there that are, you know, kind of hiring a lot of the professionals that are out there. So as an independent practice owner, using an EAP can really be a way to bring in individuals into your organization. It can be used as almost a benefit, if you will. Can you talk a little bit onto that at kind of from an employer standpoint?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I did some research a couple months back to do like a presentation or a training to a company. And I learned a lot about the Great Resignation and you know, that kind of stuff that's happening. And what I thought was really interesting in that is that more than pay, employees really are looking for mental health benefits. Like that's, people want to work remote. I know they can't do that in your field so much, right? Like it's not an option. People want to work remote or have a hybrid model, and they want mental health benefits. Like those are the top two things right up there with pay. So it's just a really simple thing to be able to offer as kind of that wellness benefit package like we've kind of been talking about, because it's in high demand right now. Like that's part of what people are looking for, because y'all are passionate, right? Like I'm passionate on my side about counseling. Y'all have a whole nother level of passion for pets and for animals and for helping and doing what you do. Highly passionate people who want to help other people don't take care of themselves first, right? We're the worst. Like we don't want to put our own oxygen mask on first. We want to make sure everybody else is taken care of.
Yes.
And that's not what we're supposed to do. So this is just one of those things that you can do to say like, hey, here it is. It's ready and waiting for you, because I know that you're going to have a lot of stress.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that your practice can stand out by offering this, right? So as professionals, we've said, hey, there's a problem. Hey, there's a problem. Hey, there's a problem. This is happening in our industry. But yet no one's, well, that's not fair. There's not that many people that are making the next step to say, hey, this is a problem, but you should come work for me because I have something in place that's going to help combat this problem. And that's really, you know, a benefit that the practice can have to lure those employees into your practice, to bring in those candidates that you're saying, hey, we acknowledge that this problem happens in vet med, but our practice is prepared because we have, you know, an EAP, we check in with each other, we have wellness protocols in place, we offer, you know, a PTO type package so that you can take a mental health day, because we know that that's important. We can't sit here and say that there's a problem and say, oh, why am I not getting any employees, when this can not solve all of the problems, right? But it can be one of those added benefits that you can do for your practice to bring in those qualified candidates.
Well, I almost got chills. Love what you just said, because I think the hardest phone calls I take from vets and from owners is, I'm in a crisis. I have somebody who needs us, so now I'm signing up. Like, again, why are we waiting for the crisis? I'm glad that you're calling. That's wonderful. I'll get you set up today. But why are we waiting? Like, let's make this standard practice. Because the other thing that I just heard a couple weeks ago was from somebody who worked in like more of a shelter environment. And he's like, yeah, I don't think my people really burn out. I think they're fine. We're not a high kill shelter. So people don't, they don't have that. He was saying we don't have secondary trauma. And I'm like, but you have people who are stressed. Like, they still have home lives, right? They still have all these things. So again, as part of that overall package, like, I love that that's how you're kind of thinking about it, because waiting until it's late, like, it's great to go ahead and serve those people, but thinking about that as a draw or as kind of like a sales point, I think is a whole different viewpoint that I haven't really thought about.
I mean, it's acknowledging the problem that we have. And listen, I think that, going to that example that you had, we are all very much aware of some of the hard aspects of our job, right? And so at the top of that list is going to be euthanasia, when we see trauma cases. And you can be an employer or leader in your practice and say, no, I mean, my girls or my team, they can handle this. They're used to it, all of those things. But from a personal experience, I was that employee, that leader, that I was okay. I was okay until I wasn't okay. And the trigger that I had in this example was a patient that came in, and it was post-op, and it was very traumatic for the owner. And I took that call, and that trauma from the owner transferred to me as I was taking kind of that triage call. And it stayed with me for a few weeks after that. I couldn't shake those feelings that I had talking to this. I might get emotional talking about this, but talking to that client in that space, that I needed to find help after that. And if you had asked me before if I ever thought anything like that would happen, I would say, no, not at all. I'm fine. I'm well, I have all of the tools in place to handle all of these feelings. But there came that point where I wasn't. And so I think as a leader in your practice, it's important to recognize that, like, it may be okay until it's not okay. And you don't know what the not okay is going to be triggered from.
Yeah. When is that tipping point? Like, that's tough.
Yeah, it really is.
And not everybody who's in your role is going to be willing to say, I'm not okay, right? They're not going to be willing necessarily to, as a leader and somebody who's responsible and strong, go and say, I need help. But if the program's already in place and all they have to do is call, nobody has to know, right? Exactly. The stigma is still there. So we want to make sure people have that access without having to kind of repeatedly out themselves.
Yeah, exactly. We've talked a lot about EAPs. We've talked a lot about kind of their use, right? So just so you guys, to recap, EAP, Employee Assistance Program, there's a lot out there. There are organizations that are out there that you can look into. Vertical Vet members, we are partnered with CorpCare for a very specific reason. They are really understanding the nuances that come with vet med. Right. So they understand what we're dealing with on a regular basis. And it's very, very, very easy to sign up with CorpCare. I'm so sorry, you guys, I'm recovering from COVID. It's very easy to sign up for CorpCare. It's cost effective. It does not cost your left kidney to join. I promise. It's really easy. And so those of you who are watching these videos, VV members, I want you to go to Elevate, log in. If you don't know your username and password, reach out to your member resource advisor. You will find all sorts of information on CorpCare on your user dashboard, or you can reach out to me. I'll have my email address in the comments, as well as Nicole's information. You can reach directly out to Nicole too to learn a little bit more. I'm But one of the reasons why CorpCare has been so great, again, is because they understand this space. They really understand veterinary medicine better than a lot of organizations. I haven't yet stumbled upon one that understands vet med the way that you guys do, which is a testament to what you guys are dedicating your organization to. So I really thank you for that, Nicole.
Great. That's great.
Well, I think we are all set for today. So again, we'll have contact information in the comments, guys. If you have any questions or concerns, email your member resource advisor. You can email me directly, or you can put them in the comments of this video. Otherwise, Nicole, it has been such a pleasure to have you on today and have this coffee talk. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate what you do.
Thank you. It really was a pleasure. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Awesome. Well, everybody out there, take care. We hope you have a fantastic week, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.